I'm delighted to be addressing the Police Federation Conference on behalf of the new Alba party. I've got two great recommendations for addressing this conference in terms of experience. The first of these is I can say I've been making a close study of police working conditions over the last 2 or 3 years and plenty of practical experience, and I've learned a great deal. And secondly, and more seriously, as First Minister of Scotland, I actually delivered some important things. 1,000 extra officers, the Police Negotiating Board to take account of the fact that police can't go on strike. I delivered a single force because I thought that that would streamline the police at the top and allow for more officers across the force. I'm going to have things that still need to be done in that, but I've got some practical experience. If I was asked one thing that the police force need now, it's recognition of the job they do in society. And if I was to pick one example of why that recognition is not there at the present moment, it'd be the vaccination plan or conditions on COVID. There is no good reason why the police shouldn't have been a priority in the vaccination programme. There's plenty of good reasons why they should have been, and practical reasons. The practical reasons awfully is hundreds of officers have had to self-isolate because of the things they've been asked to do in terms of enforcing the COVID guidelines and indeed the COVID law. The practical importance of making sure that people on the front line who are asked to do jobs that other people can't or won't do are properly equipped to do the job is exemplified in the vaccination programme. I mean, I would have vaccinated teachers as well if you were bringing the schools back, but people on the front line have to be recognised. So if I was to say one thing about the new Alba party and its attitude to the police service of Scotland, it'd be recognition of the job that people do and putting into practical effect, giving people the tools to do that job.
Well, it's an issue I've already outlined in our manifesto commitments and our 5 key pledges, one of which is to put more police officers on the streets around Scotland over the next 5 years. And we do that by introducing a local policing bill to ensure there are more officers on the streets in communities up and down Scotland and a better connection between our force and communities that they serve. I also want to ensure that Police Scotland has the resources they need to give officers up and down the country the equipment they require to do their job, because for too long Police Scotland has been underfunded. We've also set out plans to double the sentences for those who attack our emergency workers. This is something that I put as a political priority, but it's also a personal one for me as well. My wife's a police officer. I know the challenges she and her colleagues face day in, day out, acting on behalf of the communities they serve. So we want to set out ambitious plans to stand up for our officers, to give you the equipment and the support you need to continue to support us in our communities up and down Scotland.
I've spent the past 4 years serving on the Safe Glasgow Committee, along with colleagues from Police Scotland and our other community planning partners. So I'm well briefed on the work that you've been doing. I know that the past year has been really challenging. You've had all manner of new scenarios to adapt to really quickly in the COVID context along with everybody else, and you've had significant workforce pressures. So I would want to thank everyone who's worked really hard to support our local communities. I know that going forward you've still got significant challenges with the football and with COP26, so I hope that we can continue a constructive working relationship. That's what we're looking to do in the Scottish Greens, to really build on that relationship, especially between councils and our local community planning partners, to build a relationship of accountability and scrutiny and trust, and we know that that will help public confidence. We also want to ensure that there is an open and transparent complaints procedure. In the bigger picture, Scottish Greens support a crime prevention plan that's about tackling the root causes of crime. That's to do with poverty and inequality. You know, we need to make sure that everybody has a decent income, has a decent place to stay that is warm, a decent amount of food coming in. We want to make sure that drug and alcohol addiction is treated as a public health issue, not a criminal justice one. We also want to make sure that people who are in mental health crisis get the kind of support that they need from the right place at the right time. I know that there's been really interesting joint work going on about that in Glasgow, and I look forward to seeing that progress. The other thing we want to see is to have long-term investment in the kind of community work and youth work that we know actually makes a difference to our local communities. This is my background, so before I was elected I was a community worker and a youth worker, working in the community, and also I've worked in Polmont with young offenders, and I've worked in about half of the prisons in Scotland. So this is something I really care about, and I'll bring a lot of passion to the table on.
I have said that the next Parliament has to be focused on our national recovery, and how we support our police is crucial to that national recovery. Policing must be seen as a partnership between government, Parliament and the police, but also our local communities and the police. And that's why in the next Parliament we've got to make sure we're properly rewarding you and resourcing you. We've got to make sure you're fully protected from COVID. I know there have been too many occasions when that's not happened through this pandemic. That means prioritising police officers for the vaccine. It's making sure we give you appropriate PPE, which hasn't happened too often during this pandemic too. It means properly resourcing our police. That means having a modernised police service with adequate police numbers, adequate resourcing for our police offices across the country as well. But it also means recognising that all those huge challenges that we face as a country, making sure we deliver safe communities, make sure we have safe and secure public services, and making sure we support all that national recovery plan means we put policing front and centre of that approach. And that's the kind of relationship I want us to have with police officers and with Police Scotland. One as equals, one as partners, not as opponents in the fight for justice and equality across the country.
The police have been on the front line throughout this pandemic, and we need to do right by the police as a result. I've heard of many instances of police responding to emergency situations, not having the time to don the PPE before responding to the issue. That's the kind of sacrifice that the police have made throughout this pandemic. So we need to do right by the police. The first thing we need to do is to make sure we provide the right support, because you end up picking up where other public services have failed. Mental health, for instance, that Liberal Democrats have been strong advocates for reform. You were supposed to be allocated many support workers out of the 800 support workers that were allocated by the Scottish Government. So far, according to our calculations, only 12 have been allocated to the police. That needs to change. We need to increase the number of support workers. The second thing we need to do is to get investment in capital, making sure that the police buildings are up to scratch, the cars, the IT, the technology needs to be brought up to standard. So that will require more investment. The third is to make sure that the budgets stop being in the red. We need to provide funds for the police after being underfunded for years. Ever since centralisation, the budgets have been in the red. So that needs to change too. So you can get a sense from the Liberal Democrats that we are committed to the police. We support the police. We recognise and respect the work that you've done. So we will stand by you to make sure that you get the support that you need.
I'll never be able to thank you enough for your hard work. Thanks to your efforts, crime, including violent crime, has fallen sharply across Scotland. And we know from polling research that public satisfaction with policing in their own areas remains high, and that is testament to your commitment to policing by consent. You have excelled yourselves over the past 12 months during the pandemic, and of course you did this while facing the same disruption to your personal lives as the communities you were serving. In the next parliamentary term, the SNP will support the police to modernise and meet the challenges of the years ahead. That obviously requires investment, and despite a decade of UK austerity, we have increased the police budget this year and wiped out the structural deficit. And I can confirm today that if re-elected, the SNP will protect the police resource budget in real terms for the entirety of the next Parliament. We've been working with Police Scotland to modernise infrastructure, whether that is low-emission vehicles to help tackle the climate emergency or better mobile working equipment to make your lives easier. And this work will continue in the next session. Of course, at the end of this year, Glasgow will host the COP26 summit. We expect that all the costs associated with this will be borne by the UK Government. Although the UK Government has said they will cover core costs, we will continue to push them for clarity, as I know this issue is as important to you as it is to us in government. In the next Parliament, we also want to build on the work done recently by Police Scotland, the SPA, the PERC and the Crown Office to improve the police complaints procedure. It needs to be fair and transparent for everybody involved. So I can confirm that we will introduce legislation to take forward the majority of the recommendations in Ailish Angelini's independent review. Finally, we'll work with leaders and partners in the police and wider society to improve the diversity of Police Scotland and enhance the quality of data across the justice system to better understand and serve the needs of our communities.
Alba is going to take practical measures to improve the position of policing in Scotland. What are these practical measures? Well, firstly, let's take trade union representation on the Scottish Police Authority. I established the Scottish Police Authority. I didn't expect it not to have effective trade union representation. It's exactly what is required so that the reality of policing is understood by those who are asked to supervise it. And how could that come into practical effect? Well, let's take fatal accident inquiries in the Crown Office at the present moment. The fatal accident inquiry in Scotland, it was designed to give a quick and effective alternative to a full public inquiry. It was meant to deliver justice for those who've been victims and for everybody involved in incidents in a rapid fashion. Instead of that, inquiries like Clufa, for example, are taking years and years and years, which means that everybody involved has the stress and difficulty, everybody involved, that these inquiries entail. I think the Crown Office has to get its act together. I think the Crown Office suffers from inadequate leadership at the present moment, but certainly fatal accident inquiries and the delays in them are a practical example of what's wrong at the present moment, and the new Alba party will seek to use our political influence to sort that sort of thing out.
Over the last 5 years, Scottish Conservatives, as the main opposition party in the Scottish Parliament, have been challenging the SNP Scottish Government on their record in supporting the police, challenging the fact that over 100 local police stations across Scotland have closed since the formation of Police Scotland. The fact that we have fewer divisional police officers on our streets now than at the start of the creation of Police Scotland. We called for police officers right across the country to be prioritised in the vaccination programme because we knew you were going into situations where you didn't know the COVID status of those you were dealing with or the properties and businesses you were going into. All of these things, I hope, show that Scottish Conservatives had your back, were on your side over the last Parliament, and that's the commitment I give in the next Parliament, to stand up for police officers, to stand up for Police Scotland, to work with and for you to ensure you get what you need to keep us all safe, to keep protecting our communities. And also, as I've said before, my wife's a police officer, so I know what it's like for the families of police officers up and down the country. I know what it's like when you go out to work and the concerns that your family will have until you get back in the door again. So we want to do as much as possible, not just to support you, but your wider family, because we're all part of the policing family here in Scotland.
We know that the kind of short-term diversionary interventions in our communities, they just don't work. They just displace young people to the next thing, in the next place, in the next community, and I'm sure that that's just as frustrating for police colleagues as it is for local residents. So what we need to do is invest so that young people have a safe place to go, they have adults there to look out for them and to work with them long term.
I want police officers across the country to recognise that the Labour Party sees them as an important part of our public services, an important part of our communities across the country, and that I see policing as being that partnership. And I want you to know that we will fight for and stand up for police officers across the country. That means proper investment, it means modernising our police service, it means adequate protection for our police officers, it means fair pay for our police officers, and also protecting your wider families and your health and well-being as well. That must be at the front and centre as we focus on recovery in the next Parliament.
The police know that we have been fully committed to the police. We argued against the centralisation. We were, I'm afraid, right about the centralisation. You have been through a turbulent period with numerous chief executives and chief constables. We need stability for the police. You know we have got your interests at heart. We stood by you when it was tough. We stood by you through the difficult periods. We need to support you to make that change. That is why the police should support the Liberal Democrats.
I hope that during the SNP's time in office, we have built a relationship with the police based on mutual trust and respect. If re-elected, I can absolutely assure you that we will continue to listen carefully to the voices and views of frontline officers. When we took office, we committed to increasing the number of full-time equivalent police officers by 1,000, and that is what we have done. None of the other major parties pledged to increase officer numbers at the last Scottish Parliament election in 2016. We also ensured Scotland's police officers received the largest uplift to police pay for over 20 years, with a 6.5% increase. With a new pay deal being negotiated, I am committed to working with the SPA and Police Scotland to see police officers continue to be fairly remunerated for the work that you do. Finally, you deserve to be safe in your work as much as anyone else. No police officer or staff should be attacked or abused while going about your daily duty. Since February, courts now have the ability to impose tough new financial penalties on those who commit such disgraceful offences, and we will fully support the Chief Constable in his efforts to further crack down on assaults on police officers and police staff.